A reminder to check out Unfound's social media sites on Facebook, the X, TikTok, and Instagram. Blanca Elisa Roberson, Elisa to her friends and family, was a 13-year-old from Aransas Pass, Texas. She had a sister and 2 brothers and was bilingual. On the evening of August 6, 1989, Elisa left to walk 3 blocks to a school to meet a friend. Elisa never arrived. She was never seen again. I'm Ed Densel, and this is Unfound. Yes, some of you may be shocked, but Unfound is featuring the disappearance of an underage person today. This is a case that fits my criteria in which there is a person who knew the missing child who can be trusted, which is often difficult to do given that if the case isn't a runaway situation, then the people who knew the missing minor then become the best persons of interest. More on that after the interview, where I finally get to express my views on current missing children thinking. But I think this shows that Unfound treats all missing humans the same. We do not go out of our way to feature children because the public looks more sympathetically on their cases. Nylene Marshall is the same as David Hardy Jr. Leon Hosberg is the same as Jack Hemby. Mark Heimbaugh is the same as Mary Cox. All disappearances are horrible. Well, with Elisa Roberson, we have a common type of child disappearance. Girl walks to meet a friend, but doesn't arrive. And we feature her with the sound of truth. And now a summary of the case. Elisa Roberson, as a little girl, had to grow up faster than everyone else. She was the oldest of 4 children, so Elisa had to be the role model. Elisa grew up in a home where her mother was the sole parent, so Elisa had to help out around the home. But maybe the most important role Elisa played was translator for her mother. Because of this, as a preteen, Elisa was involved in discussions between her mother and other adults that would usually never involve a youngster. The only real issue in her life was her mother's ex-boyfriend, Ralph, who came by once in a while and was a very bad guy. So, on the evening of August 6th, 1989, Elisa's friend Debbie invited her to come over to her house. They decided they would meet at a local school halfway between their homes. Elisa left, and the walk was only supposed to take a few minutes. About a half hour later, Debbie called Elisa's house, telling Elisa's mother that Elisa did not arrive at the school. She was never seen again. A canvass of the neighborhood eventually showed that several people saw Elisa on her way to the school, and in fact, 2 people not connected to each other allegedly saw Elisa get into a red car. Yet, this lead did not go anywhere. I am of the attitude that the only way to fix any problem is to truly understand it without bias and propaganda. Contemplate if the disappearances of children are being accurately reported on and described, as you also try to answer these 3 questions during the interview. Number 1, was it a coincidence that Debbie called Elisa right after Elisa got home from another friend's house? Number 2, would a suspect really be the first to demand that a family call the police? And number 3, how do we reconcile the red car sighting by 2 unconnected people while the main suspect did not drive a vehicle of that color? Elisa's family has no doubt that someone took her and that she did not run away. The guest for this episode is Elisa's sister, Ruby. Unfound news. I've gotten word from that TV production company that the series on Janelle Matthews and Steve Pankey will be coming out on August 25th. That's the one where I went to Colorado to be filmed. However, I still don't know what channel it will be on. Next, the end of this month will bring on update episode number 18. Yes, really. Right now, my perception is it won't be very long. There doesn't seem to be much going on this summer. But maybe I'm wrong. Finally, I may be taking off a week sometime soon. My brother and I are due to go on an RV trip for a week. It could be next week or sometime in September. When you know, you'll know. I'm so happy to have on this episode of Unfound the sister of Elisa Roberson, Ruby. Ruby, welcome to Unfound.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Ed. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come on and talk about my sister and just to give shed a little more light on her case and disappearance.
Happy to do it. That's what we do here. Maybe you, Ruby, you don't know this or not, but we've covered like 340 disappearances. And Unfound is coming up on its 8th anniversary. And this is what we do, and I'm happy to do it. I've gotten to know a lot of people like yourself, and I'm trying to help out in any way that I can. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Let's start here. Let's just talk about your family. Of course, you are Ruby's younger sister, I understand, by roughly a year, and we're going to get into how old you were at the time when this happened. But how many people in the family, how many siblings, what can you describe the environment where you grew up there in Texas?
Sure. So my dad worked for Gulf King Shrimp. Of course, you've got South Texas. It's at that time was the shrimping, one of the biggest shrimping industries was in South Texas. And so my dad, he had been asked, his employer, Gulf King Shrimp, had asked if anybody would be willing to go to Nicaragua to pick up a boat that was a shrimp boat that they were repairing. And so my dad, of course, my dad loved adventure, so he was the first one to say, I'll go. And so he went, and that's how he met my mom. My mom grew up in this little village in Bluefields, Nicaragua. It was a little fishing village, and she worked in a little restaurant, and she showed him around the town, and I think he was there about 3 weeks. And when he came back, he asked if she would come back with him, and she told him, well, I've got a daughter, and the only condition is that if I go, she comes with me. And he just told her, what kind of man would I be if I told you to leave your baby behind. So that's how he adopted my sister. There was never any stepdad, stepdaughter. He was just so happy and thrilled to be Elisa's dad, and he was dad to her. So that's how we ended up in the States. And there were 4 of us, and I was Elisa was the oldest in 76. I was born in 77, a year and a half later.
Okay.
Actually, yes, a year and a half later. And then Tony came along a year later in 78.
Wow.
So us 3 were, they were busy those few years. And Alex came along a lot later in 1984. I think he might have been a little oopsie, but he was by then my parents had already been divorced, so he was my mom was in a new relationship. So
gotcha. Okay. And maybe just describe the home life. Is that to mean then your mother was like at some point a single parent raising all of you, or 4 of you, 3 of you, 4 of you? That's kind of the situation.
Yes. So my dad, he liked to drink, and he wasn't a mean drunk. He was a fun drunk. He spent a little too much time, on Friday nights after payday, drinking at the local bars. So he got himself into some trouble, and I love my dad, and he was a good guy. He just bless his soul. He just seemed to always know how to find trouble, and he ended up in prison. So at that point, my mom and my dad's relationship kind of fell apart. She's here in a foreign country. She hadn't been here for very long, probably 3 years.
Wow.
And so, yeah, she was single mom, trying to make ends meet, didn't have any family here, and doing the best she could. And luckily, she was connected with a lot of, with the resources, and people were able to help her get the services that she needed to take care of us. And then a little bit later on down the road, she, maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 years later, she met Alex's dad, Ralph.
Okay, and we're going to talk about him, certainly. What did your mother do for work? She's a single mother. How is she? What would she do supporting the family in Texas?
Yeah, so at that time, she had some friends, and a lot of, on top of, she had received some state assistance, but she had some friends, and they would, I remember growing up, she would do things, she was cleaning houses, just doing anything to make ends meet. So cleaning houses, I remember her and her friends would make tamales and, sell them to the,
Yum.
when the shrimp boat would come in, you'd have a lot of men getting off, wanting to have a nice meal, good meal, get cleaned up and for the next trip out. So, and then she worked in some shops. There were some shops in the town that she would do work in the back and, inventory and things like that. So a little odd jobs here and there until we were old enough where she could actually do something more.
Wow. Okay. And the children, like you said, one of them came along maybe a little later than you three. The interaction between you, Ruby, and then the nearest younger brother. Kind of all three very close. Would you say that you're all very much alike? How would you explain it?
Oh gosh, we were all very different, but we were very close. We were like the three little musketeers at the very beginning. It's like everywhere we went, we were always on our bikes. Elisa and I were close. She was the oldest sister, so she was like the one that made sure we were doing what we were supposed to be doing, that we were behaving, we were listening to mom, and so she was kind of watching over us if we were outside playing or riding our bikes. And then Tony, he was born with the umbilical cord was wrapped around his neck, so he wasn't breathing when he was born. So he almost died, and they were able to resuscitate him. At the time, they didn't realize that he had been born with he had some brain damage from not having enough air.
Oh my!
So he grew up. He had a lot of. I mean, Tony. I love Tony. When we think about him, we just laugh because he would just, later he was diagnosed with ADHD and some mental illness, and he just struggled. But I mean, he was funny and loved to always getting into trouble. But he was a good kid, and he was always protecting mom and his sisters if anyone was messing with us. He was the youngest, but he'd make sure to stand up and say, "Leave my sisters alone." And so he was the little hero of the family. So Tony is you just had to have known him to to appreciate what he meant to all of us.
Is Tony still with us, or you?
No, Tony passed away in 2017.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Ruby.
Yeah, it was hard. It was hard on the family, but he just struggled with a lot of things.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Yeah.
So that's been now, of course, the reason we're here is because Elisa went missing, and so let's just devote our time to her. When you think about her now, what do you think about her personality? What was she into? Of course, we're talking, back at that time, late 80s, and I'm going to be, if everybody doesn't know, we're doing this interview on July 31st, 2024. My birthday is tomorrow.
Oh yeah.
And so I'm going to be 54, so I'm a child of the late 80s as well. So what was she
Yep.
into? Her personality? What do you remember about those late 80s with Elisa in her in
Oh gosh.
particular?
Then you'll totally appreciate this. So, um, first of all, Elisa was always laughing, always smiling and laughing. She was just so much fun to be with. And yes, she was the oldest sister, making sure we were behaving, but she had a little um, mischievous streak too.
Huh.
So, yeah, so we would something my mom didn't know for a long time. We were never allowed to. We lived by the bayfront, and we were never allowed to be down there by the
Yeah.
bayfront because you've got boats coming in, and you don't, a lot of these people, we don't know who they are. It's just
Sure.
not a safe place for kids.
Sure.
But we would get on our bikes and we would ride our bikes down to the bayfront, and Elisa would tell us, we'd say, well, but Mom said we're not supposed to go, and she's like, it's okay, Mom won't know. And so we'd go riding down the bayfront and have so much fun. I mean, now, Gad, that's like that would have been that's so dangerous. But
Yeah.
we had little things like that. We would have fun. We would. She was into rock and roll music. It was the era of MTV, so we would sit and watch MTV videos. Play our tapes over and over again. Lisa she had a little babysitting job, and she bought her first radio, and that's how she bought her tapes. And so
cassette tapes. Yep.
the cassette tapes, and we didn't have Google where you can look up lyrics. We had to write the lyrics down. So her and I would sit there with our notebook pad and write out the lyrics to all these, we're talking, rock and roll songs, the Lita Ford, Poison, Motley Crue, Bon Jovi.
I might have done that one or a million times. Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was fun. So that's why I have a lot of songs memorized from that time. So and anytime I listen to butt rock music, I think of Elisa.
Okay.
And she had quite a few friends. She was well liked in the neighborhood, and I was the little tag along sister. And I think by 13, she was still a good kid. We'd still hang out, but I'm sure at that point she was probably getting a little annoyed having me follow her around everywhere because I just wanted to be with her, and she was so cool. But
when you think of her, do you think you and she are similar, or did you little different personalities, or shy, outgoing, very similar, or different?
We were different. She was more. She was calmer, and I don't know if that's because she was the oldest sister and she just she knew how to talk to us. I was a little more impulsive. I was more mouthy, impulsive, and of course me and Tony were the ones getting in trouble more. Elisa was just like the angel child because she did what she was told. I never remember her talking back to my mom, yelling at her, never did the running away thing. If Mom said to be home at this time, like she was like a good kid. Tony would run off, and half the time we didn't, because he would just run off, and then and me, I had an attitude. So yes, we were all very different, our personalities.
Okay. What about school? How'd she do in school? And of course, 13 maybe. She was getting ready to go into what, 7th grade or 8th grade maybe when she went missing. But how did she do in school? And what can you say about that?
Yeah, she was going into 7th grade, and the thing with Elisa and I, we did really good in school. Like we didn't have to work hard to get good grades. We weren't making she was a better student than I was by far, but she didn't really have to spend a lot of hours studying. It just seemed to come natural to her. For me, I had to study a little bit more, but she wanted to be able to do her homework so she could go play with her friends. And so I would just remember us sitting at the kitchen table getting our homework done so we can go and hang out with, and then at that age she was saying, Mom, I got to go do a report with, her friend, we got to do this report, and can I go and do this report? Now, who knows if they were really doing the report, but, but yeah, she was a good kid in school, and we were just taught early on, you respect your elders, you respect your teachers, and you do what you're told. So it just seemed to kind of come natural to us, except for me when I had my attitude and talked back.
I'm gonna guess then, given this family situation, maybe you, Elisa, and your younger brothers maybe spent a lot of time at home alone, given your mother's working, and was like Elisa like in charge when mom was gone, or what?
So my mom didn't work like a steady 8 to 5 job in those days.
Okay.
We were, well, by that point she was working a little bit more, but she wasn't like it wasn't like a full-time 40 hours a week job. Like I said, she was receiving some assistance. There was still that language barrier. She would do some little, her side job. She was working in a store there, towards the very end, just kind of in their back. But I don't know that I remember her gone a lot, and sometimes we would come with her. So I'm trying to, that's a good question. I know there would be a few times that we would go with her and actually help her with unbox. What she would do is unbox the inventory, the clothes, and fold them and put them on the shelves or hang them up. And so there were a few times that we were helping with that. So, we weren't always together, but it seemed like we were together a lot.
Okay. All right. Now, I also understand that she was the translator for your mother, so she could speak both English and Spanish, and your mother, I guess, maybe only felt comfortable speaking Spanish, and your Elisa, so was like your mother's translator.
Yes. At least, so anywhere my mom went, if she had to go to a doctor's office or the the housing authority, or if she needed to go, sometimes Tony would run off and we couldn't find him, and so we'd go to the police station to have someone help us look for him. And so so Elisa was always with my mom anywhere she went that had to do with appointments, and where she needed someone to translate for her, because she just, on top of my mom speaking Spanish, the Spanish in South Texas was very different than my mom's Spanish in Nicaragua. Her Spanish was more Castilian, so it's very, very different. And so, if you listen to the dialect, so I think that was another reason why she probably didn't feel like she really fit in, and felt almost like she seemed to have a lot of trouble with a lot of people in the town. It almost felt like she didn't belong. She didn't belong there because she was just different, and different culture. Everything was different, and so she had a couple good friends that kind of took her under their wing, and they were there when she was struggling and had some hard times, and my mom was judged, and it's like, it was really hard. And Elisa was very protective of mom, and well, we all were, but Elisa more so. I think they had a bond where Elisa and my mom were, at least my mom was younger when she had her, and they both came from another country, so they were almost on this journey together, growing up together. And I think they had a special bond that not all of us had with her, if that makes sense. But sure. she did. We all spoke Spanish and English. We all understood it, but Elisa was much better because she had to speak both. For my mom.
Okay. I'm guessing then, given what she was doing, probably she was running into a lot of topics and things maybe your average 13-year-old would not. When it comes to paper, adult paperwork and signing up for things.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably, huh?
Yeah, she was. She would be the one to help my mom fill out applications, and and it just, she was just and that's why my mom had her with her a lot when we went. Once we got a little older, my mom was starting to speak the language better. Even now, my mom still she's not completely comfortable with the English language. Even just like the other day, we were talking, and she's trying to spell out and write something, and she says, "How do you spell this?" So, so I think she does really good, but she's just has some insecurities with her, and feels like the language barriers sometimes make it hard to understand certain words
Right.
and things. But,
And English is a tough language. Difficult.
yeah.
Very
Yes.
difficult. One of the most difficult languages to learn.
Yes.
As you know,
Definitely.
certainly if you're already an adult, certainly
Mm-hmm.
there's all sorts of weird
Mm-hmm.
things going on with English. Okay, so I just wanted to make
Oh
sure
yeah.
everybody understood that maybe she wasn't your average early teen. Once again, because of the translating and having to getting involved in some of your mother's things, knowing about things that maybe a lot of people don't even think about. Maybe they're to their 20s or something like that.
Yeah, she was more mature for her age in that
Mm-hmm.
sense, and so yeah, it was a little different. She had more responsibilities than I mean, she still got to hang out with friends, but she seemed to have more responsibilities because of that.
Okay, very good. Let's move on to this. Of course, your neighborhood plays a huge role in this disappearance. Just kind of describe it. Of course, you grew up there and went to school very locally there. Did everybody, it's one of these neighborhoods where everybody knows everybody, a lot of people moving in and out, or more established people, everybody been in there maybe for a couple of generations. What can you say about this particular neighborhood?
Sure, sure. Well, so yes, it was a smaller neighborhood, and it's a small town. Well, it was a small town at that time. If I remember correctly, don't quote me. It was a town of 10,000 at the time Elisa disappeared. So it
Mm,
was a smaller town, and then our neighborhood was. We had so many neighborhood friends. It seemed like a majority of our friends were neighborhood friends, or the neighborhood kids, and so we had. It seemed like there was just um, a whole part of Aransas Pass that seemed to encompass our whole lives. We've got the grocery store, we've got our home, we've got our friends, we've got the school. Everything just seemed to encompass like just a few blocks, and our lives were just, you know, if that can give you an idea of how small and how close we were. We weren't traveling a lot. My mom, we couldn't go on vacations. We didn't have a lot of money, and my mom didn't have a car. We walked everywhere. Everything was
mm.
so close anyway, so
Yeah.
we didn't have to have a car. Um, and so to go to the store, to go to church, to go to friends, school, everything seemed to be within walking distance.
Mm-hmm.
Until we got into junior high, then we had to take the bus.
Okay.
But elementary schools, all the elementary schools we went to were all in this little few blocks area, believe it or not, from kindergarten, first grade, um, to the next elementary, Keyburger Elementary, and then you move on further out. So that's how our lives were for many
Mm-hmm.
years in that little area.
Okay. Let's move on to this. Debbie, the friend, of course, she's going to play a big role in this
Yeah.
disappearance. Her entire family, actually. But how did Elisa know Debbie? Same age, went to school together. What can you say about it?
Sure. Okay, so Debbie was younger, and how we met their family. Her dad, Bob Green, owned a duplex on 11th Street, and so they lived in the upstairs portion of that house, of
Mm-hmm.
that duplex, and we lived in the downstairs. We rented
Oh,
it. So we rented that for a couple of years, and that's how we met Debbie. Debbie was younger than me.
mm,
She was born in 78, so she was
okay,
7 years old when I first met her. And they seemed like a very nice family. Bob Green was nice, Terry Green was nice. Early on, we could tell that there were some. I mean, as a child, I'm looking at it from the lens of an adult now,
yeah,
but as a child, you don't understand everything that's going on or happening. Even as an adult, sometimes it takes years to process. And so, but looking back now, Debbie had she had a lot of um, she had a lot of problems early on.
okay,
Um, mental health issues. We
okay,
didn't know what it was. We thought she was just throwing fits, but she would just fly into these rages. and if anything could set her off, and if there was just too much stimulation, um, if there were too many kids over and she just got overwhelmed, she would just fly off the handle and just start attacking,
Wow.
whichever was the point of
Wow.
her if she was, yeah. And so we would just sit there like, what just happened? We didn't understand. And then her mom would say, you kids need to go home. You're agitating Debbie. That's what she would always say. So at the time, we're like, we didn't understand it, but then, you don't want to hang out with someone then who starts acting like that. So she starts to push a lot of the neighborhoods. Same thing. A lot of neighborhood kids, then they don't want to hang out with her.
Right.
Now, we lived there, and my mom always said, she said, you be nice to Debbie. If the other kids are picking on her or causing, she didn't want us picking on Debbie or doing anything to upset her. So we had a talk. So Elisa and I both kind of, kind of took her in, and we were even protective of her. If someone was picking on her, I got beat up a couple times for standing up for her. So that was our friendship. She was like a little sister, that even though has these problems, we're supposed to protect her.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is why this whole thing is just, it's just so surreal. But
right.
So Elise at the time, she was 13. Debbie was, I think 11 or 10.
Okay.
And I think what was going on at that time was Elisa's 13, and sometimes you may not want to, if Debbie were to call and say, can you come play? A couple of things. Okay. So Elisa's a 13-year-old, and so a 13-year-old kid. So she may want to, maybe just wants to be able to get out.
Yep.
Maybe wants to get out. And
sure.
And Debbie was like a little sister, and Elisa was more calmer, like, okay, yeah, easy going. Like, sure, I'll come over, yeah, we can hang out. And something else, Debbie, anytime we hung out with her, Debbie would call and say, my dad's taking me to go get ice cream, or we're going to go get some candy. Do you want to come with us? So it would either be me or Elisa, and or both of us. Depends who her friend, because she would flip on us sometimes. Sometimes she'd be like, only Elisa can come hang out with me. And I'd be like, what did I do? So her and I went toe to toe a couple times, because I was the type. Elisa was more easygoing. She wasn't gonna butt heads or anything, but I was the type that would say, like, what's your problem? Like, why are you acting that way? And why are you, that's messed up. I would say that, and that's where we kind of butted heads a little bit. But one day she'd love me and say, hey, can you come hang out? My dad's gonna take us to the beach or to the movies. And if do you want to come? Or my dad wants to buy us some ice cream. You want to come? So whatever it was. And so, yeah, what little 10-year-old, 12-year-old kid doesn't want to go get ice cream? Or,
yeah, right. Of course.
Go to the movies if you're offering to pay. So, yeah. So that was the kind of relationship that we had. And Debbie would come to our house. We would go to her house. Once we moved out of the 11th Street address into the Whitney Street address, they didn't come over as much, but we were still kind of hanging out a little bit. We were getting older, so we had other friends, so it wasn't as much. But when we were living in the duplex, obviously we're seeing them all the time. Bob Green, when Bob and Terry would go to the grocery store, my mom didn't have a car, but they would sometimes ask her, do you want to ride to the grocery store? We're going to the grocery store. So, it was a friendly relationship, and we'd have dinner sometimes. They'd invite us to dinner. So it was a friendly relationship. We didn't see anything nefarious, or didn't see any signs with Bob or anything,
Okay.
those few years.
Okay. So how would you, and as best as you can tell between Elisa and Debbie, was this like Elisa's number one best friend, number 3, number 5, number 10? I mean, how close would you say they were?
I wouldn't say very close at all. Debbie was more like a little a little sibling. Lisa had her own group of friends. This is where it's kind of unique. Lisa had her own set of friends that were her age that she would hang out with. She had a best friend that was her age. There was a group of them that they would go and she would spend the night at their house, or vice versa. They'd stay at our house. And then, they would go to the movies together or ride their bikes, do whatever 13-year-olds do. At that time, I was starting to have my own friends too. So we were kind of, we were still close, but we were kind of going, we were just growing up. And so we had our own set of friends. And Debbie was, Debbie had another little friend with her, that day. And I think they just, I don't know. I just think she just wanted to see if Elisa could come over. And, yeah.
Okay. So your interpretation, what was going on this day? Just want to make sure we understand this. Them getting together that day, rare, common, somewhere in between, the way this was all set up. And we have a few other things we're going to, before we get to the actual disappearance and what happened. But the way you remember it, very odd that Elisa was going to be meeting Debbie like halfway and then going back to her house or whatever the plan is. Odd, common, somewhere in between.
It wasn't odd. It was common, but it was, like I said, towards that time in that she was starting to go in her own, hanging out with her other friends. And so
Okay.
Yes and no. It was kind of somewhere in between. So it wasn't uncommon that they would meet halfway. And it wasn't uncommon because, same with me, if Debbie, depending on her mood, if she wanted to hang out with me and she'd ask, will you hang out with me? She would either come to our house, or there'd be many times. The school seemed to be like a meeting place for a lot of kids in that neighborhood.
Right.
So
as usually was the case, back in the day.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Of course, we're going to come back to this in a little bit. Let's now talk about Ralph. And at this point, I think of the disappearance, he was actually your mother's ex-boyfriend, but I understand he was a pretty bad guy. How well did you get to know him as a child? What can you say about him, and maybe what was going on that particular year with Ralph involving himself in your lives, if so, if not? What can you say about Ralph?
Sure. So Ralph came into the picture. I remember being very young when he started coming around. So my first memories of him, I think I might have been about 5. And my mom thought he was a nice guy, right? She didn't know him. She didn't know anything about him. So at the beginning, he was nice. He made her think that he was a good guy. And so, as they start getting closer, he becomes more and more abusive with her, and very jealous, very controlling, accusing her of, if she wasn't home at the right time, or if she wasn't, she was gone too long. There was always accusations that she was, cheating on him or doing something. And this wasn't like a typical relationship where you live in the same house and you talk to each other every day, you make meals. That's not how it was. Okay. Ralph was involved in criminal activity. Okay. So he would come and go, and that was part of the MO. He wouldn't stay at one place for too long. Sometimes he'd be there days, weeks, and then he'd be gone for days and weeks. And then he'd show up. We didn't know when he was coming. We didn't know. And so in between all that, we had moments where us as kids, we were able to escape a lot of the bad stuff that was going on. And because of that, our relationship with each other, we were able to find some kind of peace, and we were just able to bond in that, and that kind of kept us kind of protected from the bad stuff that was going on.
How did he treat the kids?
He was mean to us. He was really mean to us. I would describe now as an adult, he was very sadistic. He loved to do things to make us make us suffer, and he liked to watch. Things like
Wow.
Yeah, things like if we'd be sleeping, he'd wake us up and make us stay up, and if we doze off, he would make sure he would like shake us to wake us up.
Oh my God.
Making us kneel on rice on hardwood floor or linoleum floor, so it just hurt. It just was so painful. He just did some horrible things, and my mom, every time something like this would happen, so my mom stood her ground. Like she had a backbone, and she
Mm-hmm.
she would say what needed to be said. But she learned early on with Ralph, you get slapped or punched
Right.
if you spoke up. So she was living in fear a lot of the time, and then there would be times where he would be nice and laughing and giving my mom money, giving us kids, here's $1, go get it, and we'd be like, what? Thought he's mean. Now I'm confused. So classic, like,
right,
narcissist, you
passive aggressive. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right.
And so he beat my mom several times. Like, we're talking serious beatings. He broke her arm. We witnessed him choking her, and not just choking her, but lifting her head off the ground on the wall, choking her in front of us kids with a bloody, bruised face, and us little kids doing everything we could to protect our mom and to get her off of her. And Tony was the fastest runner. He was our Forrest Gump. If we needed to call the cops, he didn't sit there. You couldn't call the cops on the phone because Ralph would take the phone off the wall. So we learned early on, Tony was the first one out the door and running to get help from the police or the next door neighbors, and then Ralph was a coward, right? He'd take off, and so this is what the instability. And then after he beat her and he knew he'd stay away for a while, but then he'd come back and he'd threaten her with if you do that again, I've got friends. I've got friends in the police department. I've got guardians there. They protect me. So you think you're going to call them? And I'm not making any accusations. I'm not saying. I'm just saying what he would say.
Okay.
And so we would find. We just found it ironic that of all the times we called the police and they came, we only found one. When we did a public records request for any arrests for what beating my mom, there was only one we found for him of assaulting my mom of all those years. So that's what we find interesting, and maybe there could be a simple explanation with maybe, I don't know, I just don't understand. But
okay. In our conversation that we had before this interview, you'd said I got the idea maybe that Ralph had a particular I don't know if it was an obsession or something with, was it the brother that was just younger? Was it Tony, or was it the youngest brother had was going to take him when Ralph finally was out of the picture, that he was going to come back and take one of the sons, or what was that? What?
Okay, so finally when my mom was able, because so many years she would tell him to leave, he would always come back. She couldn't get rid of him. Mm-hmm. And then towards the very end, when she finally, I don't know how she did it or what was going on in his life, but he was into, he was involved in, drugs, drug trafficking. Yeah. So he would tell my mom a lot of the times, my friends don't trust you, and he would make threats to her, and that they're afraid you're going to talk. So my mom, therefore, that she really thought he's going to kill me, and he threatened her. And so when he finally left, he threatened her and told her, I'm going to do something to you. You may think you can get rid of me, but I'm going to do something to you that you are always going to remember me. You will never be rid of me. And so she thought he was going to take our little brother Alex, which was his son. So my mom was protecting Alex, she was watching him like a hawk, because she thought he was going to take Alex. And we were all vigilant too. Okay. We all knew, we saw Ralph, we were to run home immediately, and we were protecting Alex too. We were to get Alex home immediately. And there were a handful of times we saw Ralph lurking, walking around the neighborhood, and we got him on our bike and, come on, Alex, let's get home. We got to go. Come on.
Wow.
Like, we were hyper aware that we were not safe. And
Okay.
and so that was what.
Okay. What about just if you could remember those last couple months before Elisa went missing, the summer of 1989, was Ralph around or not?
Yes, and that's something that he was, that whole summer, was, we'd seen him a handful of times, and that's what's so ironic with this whole, I'm not saying that anyone is, that it wasn't, I believe that when they went to Mexico and that they saw him there. I believe they saw him there and they verified he was there. Mm-hmm. What we don't understand is, we just don't understand how we saw him around that whole summer when he was in that Mexican jail since May. So it just, those two things just don't match. And that's where we, if we could have an answer for that, that's where we've always had that question in our minds, So yes, he was around a lot for months leading up to Elisa's disappearance.
Okay, well, we have to understand something though. When there is a story out there though that he was actually in jail in Mexico that year, correct?
Yes.
All right, why don't you talk a little bit about that?
I'm sorry, I jumped the gun.
That's all right. Go ahead. Just do it right now.
Yes, there's an article. There was an article that we found. It's in Spanish. And it's saying that he was arrested at the border for carrying guns across the border. So he was arrested in May of 1989, and so the jail he was in, he was, from what we understand, he was supposedly in that jail from May, that whole summer.
Okay, but. So we have like what we might call conflicting story. People are saying, well, he was in jail in Mexico, but the way you remember it, the way you understand it, he was actually in the United States in Texas during the summer of '89.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And like I said, I'm not saying that that I know that some, detectives went down and verified he was there. I'm not saying that that's a liar made up. I totally believe that he was there when they went there and they verified that he was there. I believe that. So I just wanted to clarify that. I'm just saying that this is it's just conflicting, what we experience versus what we have been told.
Okay.
Of him being there.
Okay. Let me ask you some questions just about the neighborhood. Any other, besides, of course, Ralph maybe being around, any other issues in the neighborhood? Any kids being chased? Anybody else ever followed? Anything like that you can remember? Please.
Sure. I didn't know of any other kids being chased or followed. I know that during that summer, I know that Elisa had been followed by Ralph. And I remember I don't know if Elisa was there, but I know it was me, Tony, maybe Alex. I don't remember for sure, but I wasn't by myself. And I do remember that there was one time we were walking and we kept seeing this van kind of following us. But when you're hyper aware, something that I understand that when you're hyper aware, things that you think are, it could have been as harmless as somebody maybe passing out newspapers. Right. But I didn't see that. We never saw anyone. So it's just when you're on that heightened awareness, everything seems suspicious at times, and everything seems like we got to be careful. That person's walking over here, and so it could have just been our state of minds at that time, and who knows either way.
Okay. Let's move on to this. Now we'll work up to the day of Elisa's disappearance. My understanding that is she started the day not at your house, but at some other friend's house. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. Okay. So she spent the night, Saturday night, she spent the night at her best friend Charla's house. And she'd spent that whole afternoon, Sunday and afternoon, and Elisa would go to church with Charlotte. There was a group of kids that go to church, and the church bus would pick them up to take them to the church. And Elisa, from what my mom understood, she was going to go to church with Charlotte for evening services, so it wasn't out of the ordinary. And then I guess when the bus got there, Elisa decided she wanted to come home. And so she had come home. It was about a 10-minute walk. By the time she got home, she was there. Time gets really skewed when it's been so long, when it's been 35 years.
Of course.
So it's hard to tell. I know it was about a 10-minute walk, and then she was home for a few minutes before Debbie called. And so when Debbie called, she just asked Elisa if she wanted to come and play. And then at that point, that's when my mom said, well, Elisa, tell Debbie it's getting late. You need to stay home. And then Debbie, she was persistent. She said, well, I can meet you halfway. She was with another little friend. And so she said, I'll meet you halfway, and then my dad can drive you home so you're not walking late at night. And my mom agreed. My mom agreed to it. Thought, okay, what harm would it do to hang out for a couple of hours and then, come home? So,
okay. So what time did Elisa come home from this other girl's place?
So she would have come home. From what Linda says, the bus would have picked them up at Charlotte's house anywhere from 5:15 to 5:20 p.m. And then it took Elisa approximately 10 minutes to get home. So it could have been 5:30, a little after 5:30. So.
Okay. And then Debbie calls like 10 minutes later.
Within, it could have been 5 minutes, it could have been 10 minutes.
That's fine. I realized 35 years later. I just want to make sure it was a not very long amount of time.
No, it wasn't a long time, because she hadn't been home for very long when Debbie called.
Okay. And then what happened next? And
so my mom agreed and said, okay, you can hang out with Debbie. And so Elisa left, and then sometime later, now, I don't know the time frame. It's before cell phones. It would have been easy to just call and say, hey, is Elisa there? But Debbie had to walk all the way back to her house, and her house was even further away. Her house was more of it was further than just than Elisa's walk to the school. So I don't know how long she stayed at the school and waited.
Okay, well, we're gonna get into this. I'll ask. I want to guide you through this. So Debbie calls, and Elisa goes to meet her. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes.
And is your understanding that Debbie was the one, or was it Elisa the one who decided, let's meet at the school, as best as you can tell?
So it was Debbie, because my mom had said, no, it's getting late, you need to stay home. And Debbie said, well, I'll meet you halfway, and then my dad will bring you home, so you don't have to walk alone. And so, so it was Debbie's idea.
All right. So it's in the evening, early evening, and Elisa's going to walk to this school, and everybody should know I'm going to do a map video for this so everybody can see for themselves what we're talking about. It's very difficult to do locations, directions, etc., just with audio, but we're going to do our best. So Elisa is going to meet Debbie at this school, and the walk is longer for Debbie than it is for Elisa. And then Elisa was supposed to be coming home. She was going to get a ride home from Debbie's dad, Bob, before the night was over.
Yes.
Okay, very good. So now you found out, let's just do this way. Now you found out later, of course, after the disappearance, but Elisa it wasn't like a steady walk. She did see at least a few people on the walk. What can you say about these neighbors? Who did she see?
Okay, so the people that she had actually
interacted with, yes.
Yes. It was Tom Pierce, his daughter Jennifer, and his son Nathan. And Nathan, they were all good friends of ours, not only neighbors, but little Nathan was Elisa's little on-again, off-again boyfriend, little crush. And so when when she was passing by, they actually talked to her. They were all outside. Nathan was cleaning out their camper, and they just asked her what she was up to, where she was going, and she said she was going to meet Debbie, and they said, okay, see you later, have fun, and that was it. So they actually interacted with her as she passed.
Okay. And this is on the way, but the way I looked at the map, this is not a location that's like right beside the school. This is still a couple blocks away from the school.
Yes.
This look, yeah, closer to your house than it is to the school, for sure. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What was the first sign of trouble that night?
So Debbie called sometime later and asked us if Elisa had left yet. Huh. And my mom was in the background, and she heard me talking to Debbie, and her voice was raised, but it kind of shocked me and surprised me at that time. And I wasn't thinking it was anything serious at the beginning, but when my mom said, she should be with you, Debbie. She should be with you. Mm-hmm. And my mom told me she had panicked because it had been so much time that had passed from the time Elisa left to the time Debbie called, that she knew that something was wrong. She should have already met with right. Debbie and been at her house at that point. So she was panicked early on. I was not. Right. I felt like, oh, she's going to show up. She's probably just talking to one of her friends or something. And then at that point, Debbie says, well, I'm going to go back to the school and see if I find her. Maybe she's talking to somebody. And so she goes back out, looks for her. I don't know how long she was gone. Mm-hmm. And then she comes back to her house. And at that point, she says, okay, I didn't find Elisa. I'm going to wait for my dad. When he gets home, I'm going to have him give me a ride, drive around so we can see if we can find Elisa.
Okay, so Debbie's dead. Debbie and her dad.
Yes.
Okay.
And at that point, that's when my mom told me start calling Elisa's friends and start calling the neighbors.
Okay, and we have to remember, you've already stated you did not have a car at this point.
Right.
All right, so it wasn't like you could jump in the car and go ride around the neighborhood.
No.
Okay.
And yeah, and so I started calling all the friends, and that's how I knew that Jennifer, I think it was Jennifer that answered the phone, because I called first Elisa's, one of our good friends, Holly, and then the next one was Nathan Pierce's house. And I think it was Jennifer I talked to. I can't remember for sure, but I remember they said, yeah, we saw her. But because I asked, is she there? And they said, well, no, we saw her though pass. Like, and they told us the time, whatever time it was. We saw her about, some time ago, and she passed that she was going to go meet Debbie. So we knew right away that they had seen her. And so, I'm calling her other friends and other people that we knew in the neighborhood, and just trying to find out where Elisa was and if she was there. And nobody knew where she was. She wasn't at anybody's house.
Okay. When did the police get called?
So the police got called later that night. I saw when I did a public records request, the time came in at 9. The call came in that we made at 9:49 p.m. So at some point then, when Debbie calls us again, or no, the next call was from Bob Green. Bob had just gotten home, and he tells my mom, he's talking to my mom, and he goes, has Elisa come home yet? And my mom said no, and he goes, we're going to go look for her.
Okay.
And so they go, and I don't know how long they were gone before they got back to our house. I don't know how long they were looking.
Okay.
And then at that point, when he got to our house, he asked if Elisa was there. I think they just thought maybe she would be there. So when my mom said no, he said, Mrs. Roberson, you need to call the police now.
All right. So what you're saying is Bob and the daughter, they were engaged getting over to your house before the police did.
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
I want to make this clear because it's going to be very important later. Bob was actually the one who suggested, or not suggested, but said, you know what? It's time to call the police.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
When he came
Okay.
to our house and asked, and I still remember when they first got there, they were, Debbie had her and her friend had an ice cream, and they'd brought an ice cream for Elisa. I thought it was strange, but then the other part of me says, well, maybe they just really, in their wildest dreams, never thought that it would come to what it came to, and they thought, well, let's
Yeah.
get an ice cream. She'll be there by the time we
Right.
get there, and then
Nobody thinks this is ever going to happen. Right.
no.
Okay.
So yeah, it was Bob Green that told my mom, Mrs. Roberson, you need to call the police now.
Okay. The police, though, then they did get called that night. Did they show up that night, take a report? Do you happen to know if they drove through the neighborhood? Did they go door to door? What went on? Of course, now we're talking, it's getting dark. Now it's night out. It makes things a lot more difficult. Do they go door to door? Do you know what the police did over the next, into the next morning or whatever?
Yeah, not much was done so it was Officer Winkle that came out, and he took our initial report, and the way he made it sound, I mean, this was the 80s, and there was always, well, they probably ran away, or they're probably, what he said is, she's probably with a friend and she'll probably come home. And I didn't know it at the time, but I didn't find this out until just this last year. But I guess he did drive around looking for her. But what should have been done is they should have had a call put in immediately to Lieutenant Linda Thompson, who was over the juvenile division, even though she wasn't working. They were supposed to.
We're just gonna talk about what was done. We can get into what should have been done eventually, but we just want to talk about what was done.
Sure.
All right. So what was done? So police come and they, and this happens even in 2024. They show up and maybe they're just a little, not that they don't want to solve it or anything, but not maybe as zealous or as apprehensive or engaged as maybe you thought they should be.
Yes, it seemed like it wasn't taken very seriously, and I do understand that nobody wants to ever think that this is going to turn into the worst nightmare, and so they're probably thinking, oh, she's probably just hanging out with a friend, and so it wasn't taken very seriously at the beginning. That night.
Okay. All right, so the police do what they can do, drive around, knock on some doors. Of course, we know they were not successful, of course, because Elisa is still missing here in 2024. But over the next few days, were there any searches done? Of course, we've already talked about, this one witness who actually saw her walking to school walking to the school to meet Debbie that evening. Is that when these witnesses started to pop up right away, or was this not until later? What do you remember? What can you say?
So things took off the very next morning. My mom was at the police station at 7:00. Linda had just gotten in for her shift, and she was being handed the paperwork of what was going on the day before and the weekend. And then right when we walked in, she knew that something was wrong immediately because Elisa wasn't there. And anytime my mom had to go to the police station, Elisa was there. So she knew something was wrong. And things got started pretty quickly once Linda, that next day, once she was notified and the police started. They were talking door-to-door explorers. They were going door-to-door, talking to people, getting everyone's statements, finding, the witnesses. We had bloodhounds, cadaver dogs. I remember, helicopters passing.
Wow.
There were stations, search and rescue stations put up. We had people in and out of our house, you name it, police officers. Early on that next morning, they came and they got some of Elisa's belongings. Her diary, some of her clothes. They wanted to get her scent, and so they took a few things. We had friends, we had a family, we had, my dad hadn't yet made it yet because he was. Oh, go ahead.
Please.
Oh, my dad hadn't made it yet because he was shrimping on the Gulf of Mexico,
Okay.
so they had to radio him in.
Hmm.
So he didn't make it in. I don't know if it was the next day. I'm trying to think when he finally showed up, but it so things were just crazy. I just cannot, just imagine all the people coming and going, and the people down, volunteer search and rescue. Oh, it was just crazy. And then my mom and I, with our friends, my mom's friends, when we started going down the alleyways, we just were walking and walking. I just remember it being so hot, and we're walking down alleyways. We're looking in garbage and dumpsters. We're looking in abandoned houses and buildings. We even got the police called on us because we were supposedly, in an area we weren't supposed to be in. And we just thought that was just surreal that police were calling us when we were just trying to find my sister. I just can remember the initial, my mom's cries, and then when my dad finally showed up, it's just so heart-wrenching to see how it was affecting them as parents.
Right.
All my mom wanted was to find her daughter and find out where she was, and then my dad was he did his thing too. He started looking. He went to Mexico, and he started looking. He was looking for Ralph. He wanted to find him to see if he had anything to do with
Right.
my sister's
Right.
disappearance. And
What would you say was once they started searching, and no, she didn't just go over to some other person's house, child's house or something. Can you remember what the most popular theory was regarding her disappearance? What was the
Sure.
common thought?
So my mom, very early on, the first person that she told the police that did it was Ralph.
Mm-hmm.
Very
Okay.
early on, and she just kept telling them, you need to look at Ralph. It's Ralph. He took my daughter. He did it. And it got to the point where nobody's acting rational at this point, right?
Of course not.
There's no handbook to
Nope.
know how to act, and how
Nope.
to, and you just want to be heard. And sometimes things just, they were doing their best that they could, right? They were searching, they were doing their best. There were things going on in the background we didn't know behind the scenes, right? But no one can ever work fast enough or hard enough when you want your child home. So I see both sides, and her perception was she wasn't being heard, and they were telling her, look, you just stay home, let us do our jobs. And they were just needing her to just stay home and do your job. Well, she couldn't just stay home. We couldn't stay home. She needed to find her daughter. And so we were out doing what we could do, getting flyers, getting to the newspaper, getting it in the newspaper. We didn't know what to do. And so early within, my mom just kept saying the same thing over and over again. And finally they did take her aside, and they said, look, it's not Ralph, and you need to stop,
So Ralph, maybe what we might call suspect number one.
A person of interest.
Person of interest number one in the disappearance. Do you know if they looked up any sex offenders, registered sex offenders? I don't even know if they were doing that in 1989. I can't remember.
No.
But
No.
please.
Not at that time. I think it was 1991
Okay.
when that started. I could be wrong, but it was in the early 90s.
But I'll just ask you this. Were the Greens, Debbie, Bob, and his wife, were they very engaged in trying to help with all of this in the searches that they go out and drive around and things, or not?
No. It was,
Okay.
it was very strange. They were not around. They just kind of distanced themselves when
Okay.
that was going on.
Even though
And
Bob, even though Bob himself was the one who said, "Well, you got to call the police."
Yes.
Okay. All right. So everybody's searching for her. Not much turning up. Ralph seems like a good person of interest, but of Of course, some people believe that he was still in Mexico. Maybe he was still lurking around. And that's kind of where we were very, very early on. So let's move on to this. The witnesses. Of course, we've already talked about the first neighbors who saw her for sure walking toward the school that evening. Now, though, a couple other different people, two different people said they saw who they thought was Elisa getting into a red car. Do you know when this popped up? Who are these people? Do these people live closer to the school? What can you say about this particular pair of sightings?
Okay. Before I mention that, we did have two other neighbors across our house, next to our house, who had been washing dishes the evening before, and they had seen Elisa leave the house. So they had seen her. We didn't find that out until the day after, when they saw the commotion and came and talked to us and said, well, we saw Elisa when she walked out. And so we have Mr. and Mrs. Barker right next door. The other pair of witnesses, they were closer to the school. Well, I would say halfway, somewhere between, more in the middle between our house and the school.
Okay.
And one of those was from the Mrs. Alanis had 4 boys, and I'm pretty sure, if my memory serves me correct, that it was Elijah Alanis. But this wasn't known. It wasn't known right away. It was weeks after that his mom went to the police. But he had told his mom that he had seen Elisa get into this, maroon car. I keep hearing a maroon car, or red car, and so he had seen that, and then I think there was another witness further down that had said he had seen Elisa. And so we've got those 2 sightings, and we've got another neighborhood friend of our family. We didn't know this until December. She reached out to me and said, I had walked with Elisa that night when I was taking my boys down the street, down the road to their friend's house, and we separated right at the intersection of Goodnight and Whitney, because she kept walking straight and Elisa turned. So the good thing about it is more people come forward,
Okay. So I just want to make something clear, though. 2 different people talked about a red car. 2 people who did not know each other, maybe talked about Elisa's disappearance. Both mentioned a red car.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And I realize some of these witnesses didn't come forward till later. I'm just talking about all witnesses put together, whether it was right at the time or weeks later or months later. But multiple people seemingly saw Elisa walking toward the school that evening.
Yes.
There were a lot of people out on the streets.
Yes.
And when I say a lot, like 10, which is, you get 10 witnesses to a missing person, that's pretty good. That's more than most. So multiple people who live in different houses along this route going to the school.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Let's move on to this. Now, I know that dogs were used. What did the dogs do? And the listeners know, you may not know this, Ruby, but I'm not a big believer in dogs being very, very trustworthy regarding all this stuff, but being that they were used, we got to talk about it. What did the dogs do? What did they smell back then?
It's funny you say that, because for the first time I started researching how accurate cadaver dogs or bloodhounds are when tracking someone. And there is a 95% accuracy rate, but there's a 5% of them getting something wrong. So there's, nothing is ever 100% accurate anyway, but that was good to know. But the bloodhounds followed her scent just a little past Keeburger Elementary, which would have put it at 8th Street and Goodnight, if my memory serves me correct. It was just right past it. So what we believed is that she was picked up at that point.
Okay, so she was supposed to meet Debbie at the school, but the dogs, if we're to believe them, show that she actually walked past the school.
A little past.
Little past. Yes. Okay, maybe even if it's just a half block, something like that. Okay, mm-hmm. All right. So the dogs went that far and lost the scent. and this is very, very common. Dogs losing sense, and I'm not inclined to believe dogs are 95% accurate. In fact, I think they're only 5% accurate, if that.
Really? Okay.
Oh
Well,
yeah, my experience. We can talk about that some other time, Ruby. But for the purposes of this interview and specifics of Elisa's disappearance, this is what the dogs did. They went from your house and walked the whole way down, past the school just a little bit, and then lost the scent.
yes.
Okay, very good. So we've already talked about Ralph quite a bit. There is this: was he in jail? Wasn't he in jail? It seems, at least to your family, you believe that he was around during the summer of 1989, and very, very early on, your mother mentioned him and everything. But what went on, after Elisa's disappearance? I have to ask: did Ralph come along as much as he used to? Did he come over? Did he? Was he in your lives? Did you see him? What role did he play after this point? And what can you say about that?
He never came around anymore.
He didn't.
That was the end of it.
Huh.
We never we saw him around. There were still, in fact, it was a couple years later. I think in 1991 when we saw him again, and that's when my mom was just terrified, like he's back. And so he just, which is surprising. He finally, went away. He didn't come back anymore. He did send a letter to my mom saying, which was so out of character, saying that he had heard that Elisa had disappeared, and he wanted to know what he could do to help. And so we thought that was kind of strange, because that was not like him at all. But yeah, that was the end of Ralph. As far,
Wow.
he never came around again.
Do you know if Ralph ever made a comment to anybody regarding Elisa's disappearance? Did he ever offer up a theory at all to the police? Got through the grapevine back to your mother? Anything?
No, not that I'm aware
of. Okay. And in fact, I understand that really once the 90s came around, you kind of lost track of Ralph.
Yes.
And maybe today, do you even know if he's even alive or not?
Right. We can't find him. We've done all kinds of research. We've had other people involved in helping us trying to find him, and no one can find him. Okay. So it's just, we don't know. We don't know what happened to him.
Okay, very good. Let's now come back to Debbie and her family. And we'll just start here with the big topic. Her father, Bob. How did he become a suspect? How quickly and why? And we say this even though he was the one who recommended your mother, you know what, you better call the police. But he quickly became a suspect. How quickly and why?
So I'm going to do my best to repeat what I can remember. If there's certain things that I don't know completely. Okay. And me saying that it's Bob doesn't necessarily say that it's, at the end of the day, we don't know.
We don't know. If we knew what happened, we could just go solve it right now. But I'm just telling you, he became a suspect, right?
Yes.
Okay,
he
why?
Became a suspect early on.
Sure. Why?
Because of the history, from what Linda has told me, there was some history.
We're going to have to explain who Linda is. Linda was one of the investigators, correct? Back at the time. We've not really set that up. Who is Linda?
Linda was the lieutenant, Lieutenant Linda Thompson. She was the lieutenant over she was over the juvenile division, and so she was over Elisa's case.
Okay.
And we're friends now, and throughout the years we've talked, and I've been able to find out a little more about why. But the reason why was there was according to Linda, he was a pedophile, and he and also according to Debbie, because Debbie told me when we were younger that he was touching her. And then there were other siblings that had problems with Bob. So this seemed to be like a pattern with the girls in his family and his daughter and also a son. And so it was.
Okay, but I just want to make something clear. I just need to make this clear, though. Was any of this known before Elisa went missing?
None of this was known to us at the time.
Okay.
The only thing that I knew of as a child was Debbie saying her dad was touching her. But Debbie, it was hard to know when Debbie was telling the truth, because there were so many things that she would make up and lie about. You never knew when she was telling the truth. So we had a hard time believing it. And Bob Green was so nice. In our minds, we're like, well, he's so nice. Mm-hmm. So we didn't find out until years later that there were allegations of abuse, and that he'd even been arrested for indecency with a child. Mm-hmm. There was another little girl in the neighborhood. She was a friend of ours, mine and Debbie's, and Debbie and I both went to her house one day and asked if she'd come and play. And the little girl said, no, I'm not allowed to play with you anymore. My dad won't let me come play because your dad touched my boobs, and I'm not allowed to come play with you anymore. Wow. And I just remember being so shocked. I'm like, what? Like, as a little kid trying to make sense of this all. And then, anyway, so we go back to her house. She tells her dad what this little girl just said to her. And next thing you know, Bob's getting in the car. Us girls are with him. And he goes to this little girl's house and goes in and talks to her parents. We're in the car waiting the whole time. Mm-hmm. It was quite a while. So he was having a conversation with her parents. This little girl, her parents, they had reported it to the police, but the parents then had the little girl recanted. They didn't want to put the little girl through that. They didn't want to put, and I don't know what Bob told the parents, what he said to them, and maybe they just backed out. But at the end of the day, they told them they told the police they didn't want to put their daughter through that.
All right, we got to keep this in the timeline, though. Was this before or after Elisa went missing? Before. All right, so there was stuff out there, kind of underground, maybe down low, we might say, in 21st century terms, that Bob had this reputation, although let's be clear, at least up until the point that Elisa went missing, there were no charges, nothing like that.
Right.
All right, so he had a reputation for being a touchy-feely dad.
Yes.
Okay. And do you believe, in your opinion, was it because of that he then became a person of interest in Elisa's disappearance?
I think that was part of it. There were other things as well, and you just let me know when you want me to.
All right. So let's move on to this. What did you find out being, your understanding? Did the police then really interrogate him, take him downtown, and do you know if they did anything like that at the time in 1989?
They did. We were at the police station when he came in. Now, I don't know if they called. They must have called him in because we were already there. Bob Green comes in with Debbie, and of course they're witnesses. They need to talk to them, and they're talking to him for quite some time. I'm waiting because between my mom and us kids, we were all being questioned. So we're just there at the police station, and then next thing you know, Bob Green is upset and angry, and he's walking out the door and he's saying, "Come on, Debbie, let's go. We're out of here." He was pissed. And so we didn't understand what the hell was going on.
Okay.
Now, with my experience now, where I've had to deal with this, you can walk out at any time. Absolutely. When you're being questioned.
Sure.
So I do not blame him one bit if he's being questioned about certain things he's not comfortable with, right, wrong, indifferent. He had every right to walk out and to be angry, because I've been on that side too with the situation with my sister. They make you feel very, at times.
Yeah, Ruby, there's no need to defend his actions. Okay, we just, you don't know what was in his head. All we know is he was in there, he got questioned, he went storming out.
Yes.
Okay, let's we don't have to. There's no need to play. Neither of us need to play his defense attorney. 35 years later. So he did get questioned, and do you know what his alibi was for the time that Elisa generally went missing from the walk from your house to the school?
So he said he was working and that he had fallen asleep in his car at he had a lot where he had his tools. He had a shed where he had his tools, his mower, everything. It was just a little property. And he said he fell asleep in his car. And that was one of the things that they found very suspicious, because it was so hot in South Texas, and they had talked to a climatologist of what that temperature would have been like in a vehicle at that time.
Right.
And they said if he had fallen asleep, he wouldn't have woken up. He would have been, he would have cooked his brain. So that was one of the things that they felt was suspicious early on.
Okay.
His daughter and his wife both implicated him as well. They told us, they told me and my mom that they believed Bob was the one that did something to Elisa.
Okay, let's make clear on something, though. So Debbie's at home. She calls your house, talks to Elisa. They're meeting. So what you're saying, though, is Bob's not at home when this happens. He's at some other location.
Yes.
All right, and this location near the route that Elisa would have been walking to the school.
Yes, it's another Nelson Street that runs parallel to Goodnight. Let me make sure I've got. Is it Nelson? Yes, Nelson, and his little lot. I can't describe it without looking at it, but it was on Nelson Street.
Okay, so it's close, but not on the route.
Right.
Yeah, this is not something where Lisa would have passed this lot or whatever it is to get to the school.
No.
Okay. Did Debbie, being that you brought up Debbie and Bob's wife, when did they say they first saw him then that night? Do you remember? Of course, if once again, these are just allegations, but what time? Of course, he ended up showing up at your house, later. But when did he show up? Do you know when he showed up back at home that evening before they went out to your house?
I don't know when he showed up. I do know that both Debbie and Terry said that he showed up later than usual, and that he wasn't home for supper. So she had said they had both mentioned that early on, and they said that's what made them suspicious.
Okay.
Now Debbie could have just been repeating what her mom was saying, but Terry felt very. She made it well known from the beginning to us how she felt.
Right. So what we're understanding here then is Bob gets home, and then I guess if he didn't have anything to do with it, he comes home and finds out that Elisa never did meet his daughter at the school, and they go out, and they eventually end up at your house, and that's when he tells your mother, you better call the police. That's how that all worked.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, but in the meantime, there is this ice cream story that we have to... You've already brought it up. We're going to talk about it again. So they didn't go directly from their house to your house, even though at this point Debbie knew that Elisa was missing. No, they went for ice cream first.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
And this ice cream place... Yeah, is this ice cream place close, or where is it?
It was the Dairy Queen, and it's still there. It's in the same spot. It's just yes and no. So it's further from our house, but it's still in the vicinity. They drove around for some time, from what I understood. They drove around looking for her first, down the streets in the neighborhood, looking for her before they went and got ice cream. So I think I don't know, I can't remember the time frame, how long they were looking for her. But then when they were done looking and they were going to stop by our house, that's when they stopped for ice cream.
Okay. And then they came over to your house. So they show up. Your sister's missing, and they show up with ice cream cones in their hands.
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Okay.
That to me, I still remember that feeling. You're having ice cream right now, and my sister's missing, and we can't find her, and you're having ice cream. It I just couldn't even. my brain couldn't wrap around it, even at that age.
At 12
and
years old.
through the years, like I said, I tried to, say, well, maybe it was just harmless. There was they just thought, well, she'll be at our house. When they get there, we're just going to grab an ice cream cone for her. And they just never realized it was going to turn out the way it did. But I just couldn't believe, when you're that stressed and looking for a missing child, what is in your head to think, let's go get some ice cream?
I just want
always
to,
bothered me.
and I just want to make sure, when they showed up at your house, was it just Bob and Debbie, or was it the three of them?
It was Bob, Debbie, and the other little friend.
Okay. And so the wife was not there?
No.
Okay. Let's move on to this. If we are to suspect Bob in all of this, did he drive a red car? Or maroon car?
He did not.
What?
Not that, at least not that I'm aware. The only two vehicles that I ever knew that Bob drove was a green Datsun and a light white colored, either white or light green or light blue pickup truck.
Okay. So there may be, and the listeners also know, besides how they know what I think about dogs, they also know what I think about most eyewitnesses. But still, there does seem to maybe be a contradiction here. Once again, if we're to think that Bob did this, that the witnesses say that a red or maroon car, picked Elisa up, but he didn't drive a maroon car or truck.
Correct.
Okay. All right, so we'll have to resolve that if we're to think that Bob had something to do with this. How long after... Maybe I should ask you this. When this was all discovered, did they get search warrants, or did they need them? Did they not need them to go to these different locations? The Green's house, this location where he said he was, any other properties maybe that he could have been at that they owned. Did the police go all search these properties over, then and over the years? What did they do?
They did search those properties early on, so I would assume that they would have had to have a search warrant unless Bob allowed them. Mm-hmm. And with how upset he was, I don't know if he would have, but I could be wrong. I do know they did search his properties early on.
Okay, and I guess they didn't find anything.
No, they did not. They did not find anything, and I don't know how in-depth those searches were. I don't know for sure, because I don't know that part of it. I wasn't even aware that they had searched his properties until the last, probably last 6 months. I found out from retired Lieutenant Linda Thompson that they had searched his properties.
Right, and we have to remember, you're just 12 years old at the time, and this is adult stuff.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So you're being kept out of it. Your younger siblings are being kept out of this. This is all very, very adult stuff, as serious as it gets.
Yes.
Okay. How long after... Now, my understanding is eventually Bob was charged with some things. How long did that take? Did he ever spend time in jail? What do you know about his criminal history those next few years?
So, yes, he had been arrested, and this was the outcry, and this is where Linda probably comes in better. She'd probably be better to ask her this, but and this is where I want to be more careful, because I don't want to say something wrong, but might be better to. So what had happened? This is, I'm nervous to put this out there, because.
All I'm asking you, I don't want to get really. This is just a general idea. He was eventually charged with some sex crimes against children, right?
Yes, in 1991, indecency with a child.
Okay,
yes.
And do you know if he ever spent any time in jail for that?
Some time in jail, but then it was basically a slap in the hand, and one of the conditions was, as long as he stayed away from that child, had no more contact with that child, they made him take some classes. I'm trying to remember the stipulations, and so he basically got a slap on the hand.
Slap on the wrist. Yeah. Slap on the wrist.
Yes.
Not much of anything.
Not much of anything.
Okay.
And Debbie, yeah, yeah, I'm kind of uncomfortable talking too much about, because I don't know firsthand. I just know what Linda
I'm
has
not
told
even.
me.
I'm not
So
even
I'm
asking
nervous
you who the
to,
victims were. You
if I
don't
get
even
it
have
wrong.
to, Ruby. You don't even have to use any names of any victims. All I'm asking you
Okay.
is, eventually, after Elisa went missing, although there were just things down low that seemed people might have known about him that they let slide, that suddenly all those things became public afterwards, and he did have to answer for his alleged behavior.
Yes.
Okay. And once again, we don't care who the victim was. It's just that he was eventually charged with something, and this was now put on the record in Texas.
Yes.
Okay. That's all I really care about. Okay.
Thank you.
And what has he done with, what did he do? Did he stay in the neighborhood? Did they stay in the neighborhood? We're going to get to Debbie's mother here in a bit, but did they stay in the neighborhood? Did Bob move away? Did your family keep tabs on him over the years? What can you say about that?
No, I didn't. We didn't keep any tabs, because we moved also. I just, from what I understand, yes, the family moved to Iowa.
Okay.
They moved to Iowa after
Okay.
his issues with the indecency with the child charge.
Okay. Let's move to Debbie's mother. Now, you've already stated this, that very early on, she pointed the finger at her own husband. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. But once again, the way I understand this, though, is they, though, continued to be a couple after this, correct?
They did. They did.
Okay.
Yeah, she was trying to leave him, and then they ended up back together again. The stipulation was he was not supposed to be around the victim, but they divorced and then got back together again in Iowa.
In Iowa. All right. Okay, and do you know, once again, I'm just asking for your knowledge, or your mother's knowledge, your family's knowledge, did she ever talk about thinking that Bob caused Elisa's disappearance over the next several years? I understand she's now deceased, but over the next several years, do you know if she kept up that story or not?
I never had any contact with Debbie's mom after we moved from Texas, so I don't know what she might have said or believed afterwards.
All right, so is this something then where she said it very early on, and this is not something that she ever stated again?
Yes.
Okay. All right, and like I said, she is deceased now. She died, maybe I have it written somewhere, like 2010 or something like that. She's been dead for a while.
Yes, that's about right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and Bob is actually, though, still alive.
He is. I know that in 2010, a Texas Ranger reached out to me. I think it was Tony DeLuna was the Texas Ranger as early as 2010 over Elisa's case, and they called me out of the blue and said that they wanted to go talk to Terry because she was sick, and they wanted to talk to her to see if she'd be willing to come forward or give any information that she knew, and then that they wanted to also come and talk to me in Idaho. And it was about 2010, around that same time. And then I've heard from Debbie Green that her mom had been talked to by the Texas Rangers and to know what she might have known, to see what she might have known at that time. But they never talked to me again. They keep things pretty tight-lipped, so I never heard what they found out or what came of that.
Okay. And we have to remember something regarding Bob and Debbie's mother. Her name is Terry, correct? Terry?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
We have to remember something about Bob and Terry and this allegation that she made. And certainly it seems that eventually this was brought up in court and maybe this was proven. But we have to understand, though I've never been married, so I don't know anything about divorce, we know that if relationships aren't going well, marriages aren't going well, and they start fighting over custody of one child or 10 children, it's amazing how much allegations of abuse or something like that can pop up. Okay, we have to remember, it's very, very common. Very common. We've talked about it at least a few times before on Unfound. So we just have to remember in divorce court, everything can get very nasty and no holds barred or anything like that. So we have to think of it. I know that very may be that Bob caused Elisa's disappearance. Maybe it was a stranger walking down the street. But we also have to keep in mind that if they were having marriage problems in 1989, it very well could be that Terry brought this up about her husband because she was thinking about getting a divorce and she wanted custody of Debbie. Is that plausible or not?
Oh, absolutely. Yes,
Absolutely
things
plausible.
get really ugly when there's a divorce.
Right.
And they get ugly fast.
Okay, so we just have to keep that in mind. And we also have to keep in mind she decided to stay with Bob, although they got divorced. It seemed they came back together, even though she knew what her husband was doing, or ex-husband then at that point was doing. That also has to be figured into her statement very early on. That's we're just trying to be very fair about this. I know, Ruby, you've been very fair in this interview, so we just have to be very fair about this. We're just trying to be as fair as possible. All right, so let's move on to this, though. Now, of course, Debbie, she's still alive. She's around. She's, I guess, somewhere in her 40s now. Mm-hmm. And you've kept in contact with her, and I'm just going to leave it up to you to whatever you want to say about what she has said about Elisa's disappearance way back in 1989. You can say as much or as little as she has said very publicly about what happened back then.
Okay, so Debbie has been very, very vocal in flipping the narrative and making our family responsible for Elisa's disappearance. And I think at the end of the day, what she has done, I think it's revenge and in retaliation for us bringing things to light about her dad. I think she is very angry because things are coming out about her family. And I'm sorry, what I'm trying to do here is we're trying to find Elisa. We're trying to find justice for Elisa. Mm-hmm. So I tried to reach out to Debbie. I've tried to talk to her. We've tried to talk in the past and try to reason with her and try to understand, because we knew her. We were friends and we cared about her. We took her in, like, she had meals with us. We sat at the same table. She was like a little sister. So it was very hurtful and very painful when she started saying that my mom was abusing us, that my mom was hitting us, that she was, and then at the end, ultimately, that she was involved in my sister's disappearance. So in order, I think, to make it make sense for her and to...
We don't need to get into her motivations. We don't have to read inside her mind. All we're saying is here in 2024, she has been public in saying, you know who caused Elisa's disappearance? Elisa's own family caused her disappearance. She's posted that. She's put that on social media and other places.
Yeah.
All right. We don't need to get into her motivations. We don't know what's inside her head, but that's what she's saying now.
I know. This has always been so hard because I'm just at a loss with this whole situation. Okay. Like, this whole thing has just been such, like, the Twilight Zone shit.
Okay. All right.
I'll do my best.
All right. So let me ask you this then. How long has she, as best as you can tell, how long has she been taking up this point of view?
Since 2016. Things just changed, and then all of a sudden, she was saying that her dad was involved, but the only way he would be involved is if he was helping my mom out.
Your mother.
The things that have come out of her mouth are just absolutely just ridiculous Twilight Zone.
Okay. What changed? Why was 2016? What was it about 2016? Do you think, your opinion, as to why seemingly she went from one point of view to another? What changed in 2016? Anything or nothing? If it's nothing, then it's nothing. But was there something in 2016 that changed that, caused her to now start pointing the finger at your family?
Well, it could be a combination of mental illness and doing meth. And I've heard a few people who have talked about what meth does to you. And I've had some people reach out to me and tell me, you know, I knew, we knew Debbie, and we knew her husband. And someone actually just recently in the last year reached out to me and said, oh my God, like she has had conversations with us telling us how her and her husband do meth. So the only thing I can think of is maybe she fried her brain and is making up some story, because now she's flipped it on us that we're involved, and the only way that her dad is involved is if he was helping my mom.
Your mother?
Yes.
So, okay. All right. So
crazy.
Well, I don't know. I'm just always.
We think she's seriously mentally disturbed.
And you did say when she was a kid there were things about her that other people, that there were reasons other kids stayed away from her, even at 10 years old.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So maybe this is just to continue as that from 35 years later.
She had issues early on, and there were so many. Nobody liked her. Like, the kids in the neighborhood did not want to hang out with her because she would fly off the handle and start hitting them, kicking them, punching them. Nobody liked to be around her. She didn't bathe. She didn't brush her teeth. She threw these horrible fits. And the only reason why we were friends with her, number one, we lived in their duplex. We had to be nice to them. And my mom didn't like us being mean. And she told us, don't be mean to her. You be nice to her. And so we had this obligation, because we were good people, to protect her. And so we honestly think she's mentally disturbed.
Okay.
And we think this is all in retaliation for what's been brought to light about her dad. We truly believe it's in retaliation.
And when did this stuff about Bob start becoming public?
So Linda got to the Linda Thompson. She had made some posts. And how she described it to me, she said, look, I'm not getting any older, or I'm not getting any younger, and I need to put out as much information as we can while I'm still alive. And Debbie was starting to she was just getting meaner and nastier. It was kind of a culmination of a few other things. And then finally Linda told her, look, you know, quit harassing this family. And she just started making it public. And I think then that gave Debbie more fuel to come after us and start attacking us and flipping the narrative. So we don't know. We don't know if she went. Well, we assume she went to the police, and the police. Your guess is as good as mine. If you were to listen to her talk, anybody can tell. Anybody with an ounce of brain could see that she's not stable.
Okay.
You just need to listen to her and read her tirades on social media that she's not stable.
Okay.
And for them to give her an ounce of credibility or listen, I know they have to look through everything when someone makes a claim like that, but they gave her quite a bit of credibility for someone as unstable as her.
Okay, and we want to make clear for the record, we're not saying that Debbie had anything to do with the disappearance, and we're not saying that she actually knows what happened. All we're saying is here in 2024, she has been very public in stating she believes that your own family caused Elisa's disappearance. For the record,
correct.
For everybody listening, just so we're clear on that. We're not saying that Debbie was a lured Elisa back then or anything like that. All we're saying is now in 2024, she has a particular point of view, and she's pointing the finger at your family. That's all we're saying.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. We have never believed that she lured Elisa. We believe she was just a child wanting to hang out with Elisa. She has no fault in anything that may have happened or may have not. Whatever happened at that time, she's not at fault for it. And if I would love to sit and have a conversation with her, but she's not someone you can have a conversation with. She goes in circles. And it's gotten to the point where I had to get an attorney to send her a cease and desist letter because she was harassing us so bad. It was bad. You cannot have a normal conversation with this person.
Okay. Let's move on to this. After this occurred, of course, you still continued to live in the neighborhood. Was it well known? Once again, the way you remember it. Once again, we're just calling Bob a person of interest. But did it come out in the neighborhood? Did people find out that Bob was a person of interest in Elisa's disappearance? Or do you think that was something that was somewhat off the record?
I think it was off the record. I don't think that was well known early on, and I don't think throughout the years. I think it was more so in the last 8 years when all this commotion started with Debbie that it's coming out. And so I don't know if I it would have been something they couldn't say anyway. The police at that time, they would have had to been very careful. So I don't think it was well known.
Okay. Any other children, to your knowledge, ever go missing in that nearby communities around that time?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Elisa's the only one.
Yes.
To your knowledge. Okay. How long did you and your family live in that same place until you moved? A long time? Some years? Decades? What?
It was just 3 years, and it was in. Let me see. We moved in 1993 from Texas to Idaho, and that was when my mom started seeing Ralph again, and she was so terrified. She had some friends of the church help her. She went to them and told them, "Look, I'm terrified. He's gonna come and try to take my other son or kill us all." And they said, "Well, they were mission." Oh. And so they helped my mom move here to Idaho.
Okay. Got out of there. Got out of there.
Thank God.
Okay. Now, I understand here in 2024, there have been some things going on more on the personal, you doing personal work, working with some people not in the police department. As much as you can say, don't want to say, what do you want to say about that for this interview?
Yeah, so we have our retired private investigator who's been helping our family pro bono since 2010, and so we've got a lot of we've had a lot of traction in the last year. We've had a lot of people reach out to us. A lot of people have talked to Richard, and so we've gotten some good information, and those are. We're just hopeful that something will lead to something else. So we've gotten quite a few people reaching out. So we're excited, and we just take it one day at a time, and hope that the people, the advocacy groups, those people that are able to help us. That's our goal, is we just want a fresh set of eyes to look at this case. We just want the police department to be willing to allow a fresh set of eyes on this case. So whether that would be Richard, our private investigator, retired private investigator, or an organization that assists law enforcement, we're happy with whatever, as long as we have someone from the outside coming in to take a look at the case with a fresh set of eyes.
All right, and you're also, and you've even put me in contact with her, and I've spoken to her. You've mentioned her a few times. This woman, Linda, who was one of the investigators back at the time. You have a very close relationship with her now, correct?
Yes. We almost talk daily. Recently, she's been. We're going to have a walk in next week, a 35th year anniversary walk for. 35-year anniversary walk for Elisa next year, and we all plan to be there. And I have not seen her since we left Aransas Pass, so it will be nice to meet with her again and get to see her and actually talk to her as an adult and connect with her. So it's been really good to have her to talk to her about things. She's just been open and great, because I can't get a lot of information from the police department, so she has told me anything and everything I want to know, and I've been very appreciative.
Yeah, and I spoke to her for an hour yesterday. Really can't go into publicly what we all talked about, but certainly this unsolved disappearance of Elisa is something that still sticks with her, and it really bothers her. And certainly, being that I've spoken to not many, but quite, not a ton, but quite a few retired police officers responsible for disappearances who, in my opinion, for the most part, have moved on with their lives and perfectly willing to sit on a beach in Hawaii and not think about any of the cases that are still unsolved out there that they worked on. Linda is not like that. This is a disappearance that is eating her up every day and has been since it happened.
Yes, she takes it very personally. When we talk about it, the one thing that she always says is, I'm so sorry I wasn't able to bring her home, and she still has a lot of guilt about that they weren't able to bring her home.
Right. Do you have a website, Facebook page, anything like that set up? TikTok, Instagram, whatever. Any of that set up for Elisa's disappearance? If so, why don't you tell the listeners about it right now?
Yes, so we have a Facebook page called Missing Elisa Roberson, and I'm trying to learn TikTok. I'm still not that savvy yet, so I'm trying to utilize TikTok and Instagram a little bit more. But for right now, we've just got Missing Elisa Roberson Facebook page, and then we've got a Gmail, missingelisa1989@gmail.com. So if anybody has any information or that they would, or anything that they would like to share about the case, or just I've even had people just reach out and say, I'm so sorry for what you're going through. So we appreciate any kind of support like that, and feel free to just shoot us an email or a message or join our group.
Okay. And any final words before we complete this interview, Ruby?
Nobody ever knows. Nobody ever knows how to navigate these things. And the one thing that I have learned in all of this is if people are reaching out to you, it's hard to know who to trust, but just know that there are good people out there who want to help and who want to assist. So, and if you're on this same journey trying to find answers for a missing loved one or justice for a murdered loved one, don't give up. Just, I email people, I email, and there's sometimes that I just keep hoping that someone will reach out with as many emails as I send out. But at the end of the day, too, you still have your life to live, and you still need to take time for you and step back. And I have to always remember, who am I doing this for? And if I'm not good, if I'm not well, then I can't help in this, to find justice for Elisa.
Ruby, thank you for being on this episode of Unfound.
Thank you, Ed.
You're welcome. And that was my July 31st, 2024 interview with Elisa's younger sister, Ruby. I thank her for joining me and all of you on this episode. Given the number of locations and people mentioned in the interview, I made a route and map analysis video that you can now find on Unfound's YouTube channel. If you watched the Unfound Live Show on Monday nights, and you should be watching it, you know that I've given my extensive and surely minority opinion on what is actually going on with missing children in the United States. I do not believe that the numbers are driven by sex trafficking, despite all the attention the topic gets. Also, there's no reason to believe the stats are driven by sexual predators who are known or unknown to local authorities. Likewise, here in the U.S., we do not have all these missing children due to people who have come to this country without proper documentation. Yes, all the above happens. Sex trafficking exists, like we had with Jessie Foster, although she was not a child. Sexual predators who are strangers abduct children, like what happened to Jacob Wetterling. And yes, the stories are true of non-American citizens harming children. However, we could get rid of all of those today, and we would still have a missing children problem in the U.S. Getting rid of all of those would hardly put a dent in the stats in this country. How do I know this? I will give you a recent story out of Arizona. What I like about it is that it actually breaks down the numbers of the children who were found. And I will give you those stats right now. This story is from July 1st of 2024, so just over a month ago. Here are the stats. Of the 200 children found, 173 were endangered runaways. 25 were considered otherwise missing. 1 was a family abduction, and 1 was a non-family abduction. So, about 87% of them were runaways, meaning they left on their own, not abducted. Certainly bad, certainly dangerous, but not abducted, not lured. Only 2 were abductions, and of those, only 1 was a non-family abduction. Do these numbers fall in line with how the media, both mainstream and true crime, portray the topic of missing children? Of course not. Then why have things gotten so distorted? Why can't people report on child disappearances accurately? The best insight I have is this. Because these disappearances are of children and not adults, then the parents of those children get to guide the narrative. Even with guests that appear on Unfound for missing adults, well, they often have a hard time being objective. So when a child, someone under 18, and I'll get to that in a moment, goes missing, there is a hesitancy of the media to ask families tough questions. Yet, that is our job. If the families don't want to answer, not sure what we can do about that. But if reporters are not going to be curious and inquisitive and have the kind of cynicism that should go along with being a reporter in a country where we have freedom of the press, then things start to get biased very quickly. Friends and family get glad-handed. The true natures of the disappearances get left out. And hey, everyone, families of missing people included, have no problem in blaming a bad situation on someone else. Whereas I believe the natures of these disappearances starts with our culture here in the United States. There, I said it. If we want the number of missing children in this country to drop, our whole country has to get a lot better. My belief is that child disappearances are directly connected to the societal ills that have grown in the United States over the past 50 years for adults. Suicides, mental illness, drug addiction, overdoses. You fix adults, you fix kids. Kids aren't born wanting to run away. They are conditioned to run away. Likewise, humans aren't born to want to abuse kids. They are conditioned to abuse future children by the current horrible adults who are in their lives. As for what the local, state, and federal governments can do about that, here is something very simple. The current definition of quote-unquote child, meaning anyone under 18, is not helpful. Even with the limited number of under 18 disappearances we've featured on Unfound, we discovered that the reasons a 4-year-old goes missing are going to be a lot different from why a 13-year-old goes missing. Yet, for the government, they're all considered children no matter their maturity level. Meaning, the legal definition of child only serves also to distort our understanding. What I think would work better is a 3-tier system for child disappearances. Infant to 7 years old. I would call this the inability to defend themselves and lack of world understanding group. 8 to 13. I would call this the inability to defend themselves but have an understanding of the world group. 14 to 17. This would be the ability to defend themselves and have an understanding of the world group. Why these definitions? Because the ability of a child to defend himself or herself is a huge factor of whether that person, that child, can protect against abduction and abuse. Likewise, knowledge of the world greatly increases the possibility that the child could have run away and managed to provide for himself or herself. Whereas now, none of this is considered, at least not in a way that can be recorded and analyzed, where we can start to categorize them in a way so as to understand them and solve these disappearances. Or hey, even stop them before they happen. Nope, right now the investigation of a 17-year-old going missing is the same as a 4-year-old. And yes, this means the Amber Alert system needs to be changed too. What does this all mean for solving Elisa's disappearance now? Well, what I've heard is that ground-penetrating radar has never been used on any property where Bob Green had access. Yes, maybe he had nothing to do with Elisa's disappearance, but looking at those properties would be a good place to start. And Unfound has had disappearances where missing people were found on the suspects' properties. Andrea Bowman, a child. Natasha Carter, a child. Zoe Campos, barely an adult. And that doesn't just sound like truth, it is the truth. If you'd like to hear and read more of my in-depth analysis into the disappearance of Elisa Roberson, please go to patreon.com/Unfound Podcast and partake in the Unfound blog. Until then, I leave the public theorizing up to you. And that's the program. Right now, while you are in your podcast platform, Spotify, YouTube, iTunes, wherever, give Unfound a 5-star review, a thumbs up, whatever that platform allows. I thank you for listening. I'm Ed Densel, and you've just finished this episode of Unfound.